Well, how did that get in there? Candle making is a bit unique in that it's a healthy balance of art and science, process and experience. So undoubtedly there is plenty of room for interpretation, flexibility, and well, artistry. However, there is a big difference between wiggle room and just flat out false information. So today I'm going to address 7 of these common lies, or at the very least, 7 bits of false information, and help you keep them out of your candles. Hi everyone, my name is Wade. I'm the owner of Black Tie Barn, where my primary focus is candle making and candle business education, as well as selling supplies and other materials to help you as a candle maker, whether you're a hobbyist or a business owner. So if this channel seems right up your alley and something you're interested in, and you'd like to see more videos, hit subscribe below this video. It is free, of course. And if you click that little bell icon, I will notify you whenever I post new videos. All right, let's get into it. Number 1, more fragrance equals stronger scent throw. There's a lot of problems with this statement, but it is something you will commonly see. In fact, a lot of candle makers or new candle makers ask others, what can I do to increase my scent throw or my hot throw? A lot of others will say you just need to add more oil, but that is really not true at all. In fact, these days, the fragrance load is much higher than it ever was before. For decades, the common fragrance load was anywhere between 3, 4, 5% range, and you had plenty strong candles at that time. So there's a lot more going on here than just the amount of fragrance you're using. Now, with that being said, a lot of waxes these days allow you to add more fragrance, which is why people use more than they used to, but it's not necessary all the time. In fact, a lot of problems can come by adding too much fragrance, but that's a separate topic. The question today is, does adding more fragrance increase scent throw? Generally speaking, the answer is it can, but it's usually not the case. First of all, it's important to address something I just briefly touched on, and that's adding more fragrance oil can introduce other problems. Burn issues, wicking problems, and these things can actually inhibit scent throw because it can clog the wick. It can lead to mushrooming or carbon buildup on the wick, and that can actually stop the candle from performing correctly. Can adding more fragrance sometimes increase hot throw? The scent throw of your candle? Yes, especially if it's a weaker fragrance oil to begin with. Sometimes you need a little bit more to give it that extra kick, but most of the time, if you can get away with less, you should. In fact, that's kind of the next point, and that is you will eventually reach a point of diminishing returns when it comes to adding fragrance oil. And what that basically means is you can continue to add more and more fragrance oil and increase your results, but at some point, adding more fragrance oil isn't going to give you more results, but it's going to cost more money and waste more oil. And finding that balance, finding that point of diminishing returns is important. It's up to you as a candle maker, and that's why we test. That's why most candle makers these days tend to start with somewhere around 8% or so. And with certain waxes, you might need to go up to 9%. But at some point, you're not going to just keep pressing the pedal and adding more and more and more, because you're going to get to a point where you're not getting any more results and you're just wasting product. Do you actually need it? Test your candles with 7%, 8%, 9%, 10%. And if you're not noticing a difference between 7 and 9 or 8 and 10, there's no reason to go up that, because then you've reached a point of diminishing returns and you're increasing your cost and waste for no reason. Now, number 2, I've heard phrased 2 different ways commonly. One is that soy wax doesn't soot and paraffin wax is the only wax that soots. But I can simplify this for you. Neither one is true. All candles can soot, all waxes can soot. And there are several factors of what causes that to happen. They can be poorly made, bad burning practices, for example, burning too long. They could be around drafts, it could be the fragrance oil, it could be the wick type or the wrong size of wick. There's a lot of factors that cause soot, and it's very rarely strictly due to the wax itself. Secondly, soot comes in a different variety of colors. So a lot of traditional waxes, you'll see a soot that's more black or darker. But a lot of waxes these days, like some of your soy waxes, will be a much more lighter or almost kind of grayish white soot, but it's still soot. So you might not think certain candles are sooting, but it's just harder to detect and less noticeable. And if that's what your main concern is, then by all means, I mean, that makes sense. If you just want your candle to look like it's sooting less, even if it's not, I can understand that point. However, the fact that a candle soots does not necessarily make it bad. Beeswax, for example, is widely accepted as the cleanest burning wax and can actually improve air quality. However, beeswax kicks off a ton of black soot and smoke, often way more than others. So soot and the color of the soot doesn't always just directly equate to the quality of the wax. But you will hear that all the time. These natural waxes are safer, healthier, and don't soot. And there are a lot of pros and cons to all sorts of waxes. And of course, there are a lot of benefits to natural waxes as well. However, the fact that something is natural has nothing to do with whether or not it would soot. For example, I think we would all agree that wood is a natural product. But when's the last time you've looked inside a fire pit or your chimney? There's a ton of black soot buildup in there. Wood's natural, it still soots. Or strike a match and hold it against the inside of a jar at an angle. You'll notice that you'll get some black soot and smoke, even though there's no wax at all present. The point is, it's just a false statement. Now, I'm not trying to encourage or suggest that certain waxes are better than others and that you need to go all natural or not natural or some kind of mix of both. I'm just trying to address the false statement, and that is that soy wax doesn't soot and only paraffin wax does. It's just not true. Again, all waxes have pros and cons, and you have to make a choice as a candle maker of which wax to use. Just don't choose one based on false premises, and don't market your candles as such either. It's best just to be honest. And honestly, you should hit that like button below if you're enjoying this video so far. Number 3, candles don't expire. Now this is a little bit trickier of a question. I don't entirely disagree with it. Most candles, 95% of candles are gonna be totally fine several years down the road. You can just light them up and they're gonna smell great and perform just fine. However, these days, a lot more candles are made with natural organic blends, and some of those organic materials won't just last forever. They will expire, go rancid and such. And it can happen for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's just visual and aesthetics. They might discolor, for example. And while that has nothing to do with the quality of the candle, it might still perform. If it's sitting on a retail shop, the fact that it's changed colors or looks a little bit different is its value. That's part of its perceived value. So in a sense, it's still expiring and it still becomes waste. So what are some of those things that can happen? As I mentioned, candles can degrade. They can fade, they can discolor over time when they're exposed to direct sunlight for a long period of time, or really any direct UV light, or if they're just exposed to extreme temperature changes. Fragrance or scent throw is another thing to consider. Now, generally speaking, most of the time as candles sit around, the fragrance profile will actually develop more, and you'll actually it'll seem like it smells better over time or stronger over time. That's very common. However, not all fragrance oils are the same. That doesn't apply to all fragrance oils. Many will go rancid after a period of time. Even though they're already mixed with wax in a jar and a full new product, there's still the risk that over time, that blend can kind of go rancid. But generally speaking, you're fine to leave your candles sitting around for 6 months or a year or 2 years in your house or on a shelf somewhere. Just gotta keep an eye on them and check them every once in a while. If they look like they did when you first made them and they smell basically the same, then I'd say you're good to go. But just be aware that it is a possibility that candles can expire, so to speak, over time. And if you're super worried about it, candles that are not being used, keep them stored in a dark, cool place like you would canned vegetables, for example. But as a business owner, over time, you'll get a better grasp of how much inventory you should make and stock at any given time. And again, that just comes with time and experience. Number 4, more expensive materials and supplies make better quality products. For example, more expensive wax, fragrance, and so on. The short answer most of the time is no. Generally speaking, more expensive materials means more marketing cost. However, there are exceptions, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But let's talk about wax, for example. These days, a lot of the wax trends is what's jacking up that cost. Now, there are costs to manufacture that wax and package the wax and distribute that wax for sure, and certain waxes cost more to do that. Apricot waxes, coconut waxes, for example. However, a lot of them are just trend-based, or there's more demand and less of it, for example, and that's going to, of course, jack up the price. That doesn't mean it's a better quality wax. It doesn't mean it's going to perform better, right? So price isn't everything. Cost isn't everything. There's a lot of reasons there can be a high cost, and it doesn't mean it's matches the quality or the value of that product. Now, fragrance oils. Yes, super cheap fragrance oils can suffer from quality issues, mostly because there's a lot of natural elements out there and fragrance notes that just cost more to get and to use in products. To make, the oils themselves cost more to make. So if you're using an oil that's super cheap, often they're not using really the right raw material, and that's what can drive that price down. So yeah, there are times that super cheap oils can reflect cheap quality, but not always. You can get away with very, very low cost oils sometimes that still scream with hot throw and perform fantastic. Just because they're cheaper doesn't necessarily mean you're not getting the results you're after. But really, the only way you can determine whether something is valuable to you and high quality for you is by testing it. Because value is perception, and if something's working for you, then you're getting the max value out of it, regardless of the cost. Now, with that being said, if you aren't aware, we sell fragrance oils at Black Tie Barn, and we're kind of nestled right in the middle. We're not on that super low end price range, and we're not anywhere near those kind of luxury type fragrance oil brands. We're smack right in the middle, but we are candle makers and make fragrance oils for candle makers. So every oil that we sell and produce are ones that we would use ourselves, and we test ourselves. We're confident in them. We know what we're looking for. We know their quality, and we know that the price point's fair across the board. And you'll notice the prices vary. And it's kind of to my point. Certain oils cost more to make, so they're naturally going to cost more to sell. But if you're interested in checking out our fragrance oils, go to blacktiebarn.com, go to fragrance oils. We're adding more all the time, but they are fantastic, and would love to have you check them out. Samples, by the way, we start at 2-ounce samples, not your typical 1 or even smaller than 1 ounce. That way you're getting enough to actually test a couple candles with, or even wax melts. Now, supplies. Should you spend more on supplies, tools, gadgets to help you with your candle making? Well, again, I think the same thing holds true. Supplies are about what makes your job easier, what makes your process more efficient. That does not necessarily mean it's going to be better quality, but it can help in other ways. Again, efficiency, process, make your life easier. For example, one of the tools I talk about all the time is these wick centering devices and clips from Norden Candle Supply. And I'll show you a little bit of the footage here of what I'm talking about, and I'll link a video in the description if you want to see what those products really are and how you can use them. And by the way, since that video, they've released several other products now. So they do a great job. But products and tools like that are meant to make your life easier, make you faster, more efficient, but not necessarily improve quality. Although I would argue that their tools actually do improve quality because they make sure your wicks are centered and consistent all the time. So clearly there are some exceptions to this rule, but generally speaking, spending more money on supplies and materials is not going to guarantee you better results. This is science, this is art, and it takes some experience and practice from you as well to get the results you're after. Certain things can make it easier, but it doesn't guarantee you those results. You don't need to spend a fortune to get good results. Number 5, candles should get a full melt pool across the top of the candle on the very first burn. This one drives me mad. It has been a common myth for I don't even know how long. I mean, ever since I've started making candles 12 years ago, I've been hearing this. Can that happen? Yes. Should that happen? Not necessarily. It depends on the jar, the size of the jar, the shape of the jar, depends on the wax. If you've got a really hard wax, yeah, you're better off trying to get closer to a full melt pool because it's gonna be harder to catch up later. A super soft wax, not needed. It's gonna catch up easily later as the candle burns down and heat gets trapped in the jar. You cannot put a rule like this in place as just a black and white rule. It's just not true. In fact, a lot of times, if you get a candle with a full melt pool across the top on the first burn, you could be overwicked easily. In fact, a lot of times you are. There's just so much time for the candle to catch up and burn properly as the candle burns down. And if you're getting that at the very beginning, you could easily be overwicked. Number 6, all essential oils are safe for candle making. Some, yes, but only in controlled and small amounts. All, definitely not. Many have very low flash points, which makes them flammable, so added to hot wax or exposed to an open flame can cause them to ignite and become a fire hazard. In addition, many essential oils also give off very toxic fumes if they're exposed to heat or flames or basically when they're burned. Like with most everything when it comes to this craft, testing's key. You need to test your products in the way they're going to be used and make sure they are safe before you roll them out as a finished product. Number 7, strong cold throw should also mean strong hot throw. Oh, I wish that was the case, but unfortunately, it's not. The two are not related. There's a reason there's 2 different names, cold throw and hot throw, because they're different. If you're not familiar with those terms, cold throw is how strong your candle puts off the scent without burning it, just kind of walking by or smelling it when it's not lit. Hot throw is how strong a candle fills the room or the open area it's in when it's burning. Some waxes have great cold throw and weak hot throw, and others vice versa. They've got strong hot throw and weak cold throw. Why? Hell, I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I can tell you what I've learned. All I can do is really pass along some of the information I've got from others who are definitely more experts in this field than I am, what I've learned from some of the best in the industry. First of all, you need to know that it often just depends on the oil. Some fragrances are just not that strong, and some are super strong no matter what you do, and others are picky. Some are just not great when they're exposed to heat, and they don't really dissipate into the air very well or travel through air very well, but just kind of sitting there present, they're pretty strong. But it frequently depends on the wax too. Certain waxes are very soft and they've got more open molecules, open space, so when a candle's just sitting there, it's easy for that scent to sort of just kind of hover and float, and it's very easy to pick up and detect that scent just kind of being close to it. A lot of your natural soft soy waxes, for example, have great cold throw. But that has nothing to do with when that candle is burned. For starters, it's no longer a solid wax. It's now turned into a liquid wax. You've totally changed the properties, which means you've changed how that material is going to perform. Now it's in a liquid state, and liquid particles are very different than solid particles. It's a whole different process. Look, we could get more and more sciencey with this, but the simple answer is they're just not the same. And certain waxes are going to excel at one or the other or both, and some don't excel really at either one. Like I always say, you as a candle maker need to decide what factors are most important to you. Do you care more about cold throw? Do you care more about hot throw? Do you want something that's a good balance of both? And again, those are just a few of the factors to consider. There's a lot of things that you need to decide what's important to you when choosing your wax. Candle making can be a lot of fun and rewarding and profitable if you're in it for that. But it gets a lot more difficult and stressful if you buy into false pretenses and start creating candles based off of that false information. So try not to buy into the myths, stick to the facts, and learn from your own experiences as a candle maker. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think most people are intentionally spreading lies about candle making. We just awfully simply repeat what we see or hear. We regurgitate information, and often we're just taught wrong in the first place, whether it's done intentionally or not. Facts are facts. Myths are myths. As a new candle maker, as a beginner, this can be an overwhelming craft, so I don't want to add lies into the mixture. It's just gonna make things a lot more difficult, a lot more confusing. Keep being flexible, introduce your own processes, your own experiences, and so on. But do so within the constraints of reality and the truth. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like this video below if you did enjoy it, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more videos. Also, check out our amazing line of fragrance oils at blacktiebarn.com, as well as other supplies and materials as well. And I also provide some educational resources there for you to check out if you're interested. Thank you again, and I'll see you all next time.